everyone, and welcome to episode 55 of the Plug In Play podcast. I am your host, Henry, and my God, everything is on fire. It's been a terrible week for news in the gaming industry. We have Bluepoint Games being shut down out of the blue, some would say, and then Phil Spencer retiring very abruptly. Some would say maybe it wasn't actually retiring from Xbox, and new leadership from the AI branch being put in place. There's been a lot of other news, but we honestly had to pare it down because it's just been so crazy. Steam Next Fest has been going on. I've tried several demos from that. Come and see what's worth playing at Steam Next Fest, what's worth looking forward to, and I have initial impressions of Resident Evil Requiem. Of course, the new Resident Evil game. Everybody loves Resident Evil. It's like Fast and the Furious, but video games, pretty much. I'm about 66% of the way through the game. Well, why don't you check out my opinions on that, But, before we do that, we have the housekeeping, of course. Why don't you give us a good like, subscribe, rating, whatever the case is. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast. We're on Twitter or X. We're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all under Plug In Play Pod 1. You leave us a comment there. You can be a part of the show. I'll read it out on the show. We can be friends. You can do the same thing by sending an email in at pluginplaypodcast1@gmail.com. And all that info is in the description for your ease, for your comfort. And while you're down there, if you like something I have to say, you don't like something I have to say, you can skip directly to it or past it. I have timestamps down there. That's a labor of love. I do it for you. And I think that's kind of the gist. That's our general housekeeping. Thank you for sticking with me through that. Just some general chatter. Friends, how's it been? I've had the cold, the flu. Honestly, it feels like the dang flu. You may be able to tell a little bit. I've had to postpone recording for quite some time. I try to get recording done a little bit earlier in the week. And then I have time to edit and get everything done so we can have a nice schedule going for you. But I have been absolutely under the weather. Real crummy. No bueno. I'm still kind of high on cold medicine, and that's why I'm really intimidated by this week's show, because there's so much to go through, and it's especially the Xbox stuff. Oh my gosh, there's so many threads to pull from. I don't know if I can even do the story justice in my current mental capacity, but we're going to do the best we can. You probably can still hear I'm a little congested, but that's what video games are for a good sick day. But even I was so out of it, though, I really didn't even want to play video games. I was like, I just want to die. Just kill me. But also in the interim, I watched all of the second season of Fallout, the Amazon Prime show. Gosh darn, that show is fun. That show is just a fun show. What a good time that is. I would say that overall had a great time, but I would say the main complaint I had about it is it's teasing like New Vegas. That was kind of the big like lead in, I guess, for season 2 is like, we're going to New Vegas. It's New Vegas, that game. Everybody, we all know you love New Vegas, Mr. House, like, isn't that crazy? We're going to have him. And like, that's a very minor part of the season, I would say. Clearly building to something bigger. But that's what I think this whole second season really is like, well, we're really just kind of building to bigger and better things. But I enjoyed the ride. I thought it was fun. I thought, it was funny. It was action-packed, thrills, well-written, great characters. There's really just nothing else to say about that Fallout show other than, dang, I'm really surprised that they are nailing it this well. And like, it's also very widely appealing. Like my wife has a friend and she's like, oh yeah, I don't play video games, but that Fallout show, it's really good. I'm just like, well, dang. Normally you don't see like normies popping into a video game show, especially when it's really video gamey like Fallout is. The Last of Us was already kind of a freaking movie. It was already pretty much made as if a movie. It was being made as a movie. But like Fallout obviously certainly was not. It's very much being adapted into that, and the universe is very much more out there and different than something like a very traditional zombie movie like a Last of Us would be. Um, Zombies are possibly the most palatable and widely appealing thing in the human race. Like I don't know what it is about zombies, but people just I remember in like the early 2000s people were like, we're getting zombie fatigue. There's no way people will want to continue to like zombie stuff this much cuz everything is zombies. And then like it never actually stopped. Like people kept liking zombies. I think it's just one of those things that just will continue to be a staple of our existence until the end of time. It's just zombies. Wow. Everybody loves shooting those things. We love shooting those things. We love seeing those things get shot. And we love seeing people do stupid stuff in a zombie apocalypse that leads to inevitable chaos. Like, we just love it. It's just a great time. The pandemic was kind of a real world situation that kind of, you know, emulated that in a way, but we apparently just are still about it. We can't get enough of it. It's just amazing. But that's a good, I don't have a comment corner this week. It's very unfortunate. I had one person comment that I was AI and I deserved to die, but I think they were looking at an older video, so it wasn't necessarily anything super recent. But I would love to have a comment corner. Comment corners have been my favorite thing, part of the show, for the past several episodes. So, I highly encourage you. Please comment on an episode. Send me an email. As I say at the beginning of all the housekeeping, it's not too upsetting to me this week because we got so much to talk about. In all honesty, there has been, kind of segueing into the news, there has been the two big stories I think are massive. The Bluepoint and Xbox, they are massive, massive stories. We'll get into them in just a second. There's been a million other things that have happened though that have been very small. Nacom filing for bankruptcy. They're kind of a smaller AA studio. That's would have talked about that minorly. It's mainly because nobody gives a frick about what most things Nacom is publishing, like Greedfall. Yeah, I didn't think you would recognize that. That's like a very double A, like BioWare like. But what else? Pokemon has been releasing games. There was the of course controversy because of course it's a Nintendo and of course it's Pokemon, so it gets clicks. Everybody's going to talk about it. Pokemon releasing Pokemon Red and Green for the Pokemon 30th anniversary. That Pokemon 30th anniversary. That was actually on the docket at one point. I removed it. Because it was just so, like, if you watched the Pokemon 30th anniversary showcase, it is boring as frick. It's like 30 minutes, or I think it's only 20 minutes of them like going through like basically 30-second ads for like 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, it's like you can see Pokemon that have been in Pokemon Go before again. And it's like, thank you very much. And I'm sure that's like a very big deal to people who play Pokemon Go, who's like, oh my gosh, I missed out on that Pokemon. Now I can finally catch them or something. I don't know. I don't know the meta of Pokemon Go. I don't know what people are trying to do with it. But like, I guess that's a really big deal. People are really looking forward to doing that. There was like a bunch of little announcements like that. Oh, Pokemon Sleep is getting an update. Okay, I forgot that Pokemon Sleep exists. Thank you for reminding me. I think they actually make a good bit of money off of Pokemon Sleep too, which is like insanity to me. If you didn't know, Pokemon Sleep is literally like an alarm clock that just like it's like a sound of like Pikachu or something when you want to freaking wake up. I don't know. I've never used it. But it's a very minimal thing. It's just like, yeah, do you want Pokemon noises while you sleep? Perhaps. Well, we have the thing for you. If you were looking for that, we've got it. So that's cool. But really the big announcement there was also they had a freaking jukebox, a $70 jukebox that looks like a Game Boy, and you have to put in like a cartridge to play a song from like the Pokemon games, which is insanity to me. Oh my gosh. Like I get it. It's novel. That's fun. It's a fun, cute idea. Okay? I'm willing to admit that. $70? Come on. Like, oh my gosh, how much money do you think your Pokemon fans have? And they know the answer to that, and it's correct. It's way too much. But like and they're correct. But it's like, gosh darn. Like that's just like what I have an iPod. Like my phone is an iPod. I don't need this jukebox thing that looks like a Game Boy and I will never actually freaking use it. Like it's just a novelty. It's a collector's item. I get it. But gosh darn, Pokemon fans, have some self-respect. Where is your self-respect? I have a friend who's a really big Pokemon fan, like absurdly big Pokemon fan, and every time anything happens with Pokemon, it's like, oh my gosh, I already know what his opinion is gonna be. It's gonna be, this is amazing. That's all his opinion will ever be. Is this is amazing. It's Pokemon. This is great. It's like, okay, I mean. Sure. Okay, bud. I think we need to expand upon our examination of Pokemon a little bit because there's definitely problems with it, but hey, whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you smile at the end of the day, man, I get it. But anyway, the big thing there was like Pokemon the next gen, which is coming out in 2027. And I remember, oh my gosh, same guy. He was like, "Yo, dude, they have like reflections in the water, like the puddles. You can like kind of see a reflection in it." I'm like, "Bro, I know this is major for you as a Pokemon fan." I was like, I know this is a mind-blowing like expansion of technology for a Pokemon game, but we've all experienced this in any other platform for at least a decade now. Like, yes, puddles can have a reflection in video games. It's insanity, I know, but I'm glad that you're with us now. I'm glad that you caught up as a Pokemon fan. It's just so sad. It is genuinely kind of sad to see a Pokemon fan get excited for like the smallest things that are just that should be so standard within our gaming industry at this point, but it's just like Pokemon is such a big deal and Nintendo has starved them for literally 3 decades at this point. It's like, oh man, yeah, that poor child. It's like seeing a starving child and you give them like oatmeal and they're like, "Oh my, thank you. May I have some more?" And it's like you don't even know what a steak tastes like. Like you have no idea what a steak even is. You just think oatmeal is the best, the gruel is the best thing that you can get. It's just kind of sad. But anyway, that was on the docket. I guess I just talked about it. I was going to talk about it in much more detail. But then we had major stories drop like Bluepoint being shut down. Bluepoint Games has been shut down by Sony after not even releasing a full game under their own banner. So, Bluepoint Games, if you are unfamiliar, is basically a premier remake studio. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think it was a great fit for Sony. So before Sony, they had done stuff like the Metal Gear Solid remake. They did the Shadow of Colossus remake. Shadow of Colossus was a bit more of a big deal. Metal Gear Solid was kind of more of a like we pretty much put HD textures on, an old game. We didn't really do much to it. Shadow of the Colossus was more of a ground up remake. And then before the acquisition in 2020, they produced, or excuse me, 2021 they released the Demon Souls remake, obviously heavily partnered with Sony, because Sony owns that IP. So they put it out. It was a 91 on Metacritic. Very, very, very good game, right? And a lot of people were impressed by this game, and it looked great. I played it. I beat it. It's a great game. It's Demon Souls. It's Demon Souls again, but it's a very, very well done ground up remake. And then essentially they were, shut down. they were shut down as of like last week. So they never actually released any. They were acquired shortly after releasing the Demon Souls, remake. So Very sad, obviously, because this was a studio that clearly could have been a remake studio. Sony has a lot of games in their back catalog that are considered classics, and these are games that could have just kind of been done in perpetuity. So essentially, what I would assume the strategy is like, okay, well, remake Siphon Filter. Okay, well, that's a PlayStation 1 game. It looks like garbage. Sure, that's a great idea. You remake Siphon Filter. It's easy money. It's a well-known IP. Probably nobody remembers it now, but whatever. I'm just throwing out a random IP that's considered classic from the old Sony days and PlayStation 1. So you remake Siphon Filter, and then that takes 2 or 3 years, whatever the case is, and then another 2 years, 2 or 3 years go by, and you're like, okay, well, now PlayStation 2 games are kind of retro. They need to be updated. And it's like, well, here's Jak and Daxter. Go remake Jak and Daxter. And it takes them 2 or 3 years to do that. And they come back and they say, okay, great. Now PlayStation 3 games are kind of considered rogue, or excuse me, vogue. Remake Ratchet and Clank, A Rift in Time, or a Crack in Time, or whatever the case is. It would basically be in perpetuity. You just keep remaking these old games as you go. That just seems like the obvious usage for the studio, right? And that's not seemingly what happened with Bluepoint at all after being acquired. So, fortunately, a couple of days ago, so it's been kind of all over the place with the news on this. Originally, there was a guy on Twitter who kind of came out with most of these rumors and most information. He came out with a big tweet. It went viral, of course, and he was not a very well-known source of information, and so I was considering it rumor up until this point. I wasn't actually going to talk about it at all. And then Jason Schreier, of course, picked up on it and wrote a story about it and more or less collaborated all of what he said. Most of at least, the vast majority. And then this guy has gone dark. He deleted his account. He renamed it. I don't know. It's hard to find his original source. Essentially, he just went around LinkedIn and just messaged people who had Bluepoint in their bio and then just asked them what the heck happened. Which is, hey, that's journalism, right? But point is now we have an actual journalist who's actually got the scoop, right? A verifiable source, right? So I love a good story time, don't you? Let's hear the story of Bluepoint Games. What happened after Sony acquired them? So this was not anything new, right? We knew these things. So what happened first was they were essentially made a support studio. So they were asked to help Sony Santa Monica with God of War. And after of which, when they were done with that, they said, we want to work on our own game. We want a new game, not necessarily a remake. We want an original IP that we can work on, like a new thing from the ground up that we would make that's not doesn't have bare bones framework, right? So, what did Sony say? Well, Sony said, "Hey, cool. We really want a bunch of live service games, all right? So, you need to be working on a live service game." And they said, "Okay, cool. We just worked on God of War. We'll make a God of War live service game." And this was going to be an Atreus spinoff, which we all knew Atreus was going to get his own spinoff at some point. Kind of surprises me that Bluepoint would be given to them, and it would be like a live service game, but it is what it is. So it would be Atreus, and he falls into Hades or the underworld, and it's basically his trials of going through that. I even look at that immediately and I say that seems like an interesting thing to make an ongoing live service game. Maybe you can make it work, but I just look at that and I say that just doesn't seem like something you would want in perpetuity. It feels like that is a finite single player experience to me. Again, maybe they had a different idea. And then I also don't know how you incorporate kind of multiplayer into that. Most live service games have multiplayer elements in some way, shape, or form. It's a big hook for a lot of people. So there was supposed to be a multiplayer element to that in some way. I can't imagine what it would be, but sure. I mean, again, I didn't see it. This was apparently not so good. So this was a studio that did not have a lot of design experience. They had a lot of art experience. They had a lot of other expertise that kind of trended well with making a game that already had a lot of design framework in place, like a remake. So essentially, this caused a lot of strife amongst the studio internally. Morale dipped, and eventually they were kind of waiting for Sony Santa Monica staff to come over and help. So I think, according to the original leaker, they were waiting for a director specifically to help like herald the game, and that kind of seems ridiculous in my opinion. But Jason Schreier does not corroborate that specific piece of information, but essentially they were waiting for Sony Santa Monica staff to help support the game, and they continued working on it until 2025, and they basically decided this is not going to work out. And this is not surprising at all, because even somebody like Naughty Dog was a studio that was working on a live service game, and they eventually decided, oh, there's no way we can support this. Likely because a live service game takes a lot of time and a lot of studio involvement. So like Naughty Dog would have had to basically had a team 100% devoted to this Last of Us live service game until the end of time. And that was probably something they didn't want to have to commit to. Fair enough, because they think Naughty Dog is probably a bigger, better studio that can be working on bigger, better things than just supporting a game and keeping it alive for forever. So, especially if that game doesn't pan out very quickly or well. So, in this case, Bluepoint would have probably had to be completely subsumed by this specific game, and it probably wasn't very good because Bluepoint is not very good at making these kind of games at all. So, Bluepoint has now nothing to work on. It's 2025. They've been working on a game for 4 years, or not really 4 years. It's probably about a year or two, maybe 3 years. I don't know. I can't remember exactly when the God of War game that they were working on wrapped. But essentially, for a few years, they've been working on this live service game. So now they have nothing. They must now find a new game to work on. So they say, hey, we did the Demon Souls remake and it did really, really well. And it just kind of seems obvious, right? People are clamoring for this next game. It's called Bloodborne. Bloodborne remake. Well, if you've ever heard of anybody talking about remakes they want, it's always Bloodborne, and that's because Bloodborne is kind of known for having a lot of technical issues, frame rate drops, and stuff like that. I didn't give a frick about this one. I played Bloodborne, but there are so many snobs out there who are like, "Yo, you have to remake Bloodborne. It's unplayable in its current state. You can't play Bloodborne when there's frame rate drops." Blah 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 blah. Again, this was not something that ruined my experience of Bloodborne when I was playing it, but essentially they said this is an obvious win. Demon Souls remake got 91, sold 1.5 million copies. It was, a very well regarded game. Bloodborne, it has to do better, right? It's probably it's an ace in the hole. It is a hole in one. There is no way this is a bad idea. And Sony said, "Look, the numbers make sense. I think, we would love for you to do it. However, here's the big controversy. From Software says you can't make this game. Miyazaki specifically comes down from on high, who, if you aren't familiar, the director of Bloodborne, director of, basically all of the big Souls games, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Elden Ring, all of them. He's the god behind all of the big FromSoft games. And so he says, look, this is my baby. I don't want anybody touching it. And if you give it to somebody else, I'll be pissed. And Sony essentially says, look, we don't want to burn a bridge. We don't want to burn a bridge with Miyazaki. He's far too busy to work on it right now. And, because he's a successful mother effer pumping out 1 million different games. And, it's not really worth his time to go back and work on a Bloodborne remake when he could be doing something else. So he's saying he doesn't want anybody else to touch it. And we are going to honor that. And so you cannot work on Bloodborne. So this has been a big to-do amongst everybody, basically saying, like, I can't believe, why? And it really just does come down to this dude is a big deal. And, like, Sony owns Bloodborne. Like, they own two of their games. They own Demon Souls and they own Bloodborne. And I think Demon Souls was kind of an initial first step for a lot of that particular franchise, the Souls series. And it's not as soft of a spot, I guess. There's a little bit more of there's a lot of less people care about Demon Souls, I guess. And I guess Miyazaki kind of falls into that bucket. Bloodborne, I guess he has a lot more of a soft spot too. So when you have Miyazaki come down from on high and say, if you piss me off, I am less likely to work with you in the future. I mean, it's very interesting because when I'm looking at it from a high level perspective, Sony owns a large portion of From Software. They own the parent company of From Software, which is Kodakawa. They have about a 33% stake in Kodakawa or something like that, a very large share. So they have a very large say in From Software's business activity. Not a complete say, but a very large say. So they just feel that Miyazaki is that important of a guy that they don't want to piss him off. And that's a lot of relationships, especially in Japanese business. It's a lot of that. And I respect that. But it is very interesting that it's just like, yeah, it's just remaking it. It's not like they're making a sequel. They're just gonna basically touch it up. They're gonna, put a new coat of paint on it and try to make it work a little bit better. They're not really gonna change that much. They're just really gonna kind of, make it a more well-refined experience. And even then Miyazaki's like, no, you can't do that. And I think that is where I see this as being a little silly, obviously. But I get it. It is what it is. It's his baby. It is what it is. I think people have constantly been pining for this Bloodborne remake, constantly been saying, why, where is it? Obviously you should do this. And this is why. It's Miyazaki. Essentially is the not direct answer, but more or less implication that we're getting from multiple sources. This has apparently been from everything that's come out after this particular release is like everybody's like, oh yeah, this was an open secret. Like everybody in the gaming industry kind of knew that. Is that, Miyazaki doesn't want him to do Bloodborne remake. Everybody wants it, but just nobody it's Miyazaki's fault essentially. But it's auteurs. What are you gonna do? So, anyways, they've been told no, you cannot do the obvious thing for you to do. So they say, okay. How about we do another update to Shadow of the Colossus? That one was all right? And they say, no, we don't want that. So this already seems weird. Just from surface level, because they've already done Shadow of the Colossus already. So like that's a really weird thing to pitch, right? Is let's do Shadow of the Colossus again. I know we already did that, but let's do it again. Okay, interesting perspective. So obviously that sounds crazy. If you go by the original leakers info, what they were essentially pitching was not only remaking it again, but they were going to add like another 50% content. So they were going to add like if you haven't played Shadow of the Colossus, it's essentially a boss rush game. There's like 12 or 13, I can't remember, colossi, which are just basically boss fights. And they were like, well, we'll add like 5 new bosses and then 2 bosses that never actually made it into the full game that were conceptualized but never made it in. And so essentially you're getting like a sequel. It's more or less a Shadow of Colossus 1.5, right? And so that sounds a lot more interesting to me when you put it like that. That is not what Jason Schreier puts in his article, so I am not going to say that that is exactly what the case was. But that if you came to me and I was a Sony exec and we said we can just remake Shadow Colossus again, I'd say you're insane. Like, I think you have to come to me with something more than just we're making it again. So I am willing it to believe this leaker in saying, yeah, they probably went to them with added content as well. We're not just making Shadow of the Colossus again. We're making Shadow of the Colossus 1.5. Okay. So that got shot down. So they said, look, we really want to still make our own new game. And this is directly reported from Jason Schreier that the studios still very much wanted to make their own game. So they said, hey, how about a Ghost of Tsushima spinoff? This was immediately shot down by Sony as well. The reference that they have in this article is that more people from the other studios would have to come and help with this. So you can't just say, oh yeah, do whatever the frick you want. Like, they would have to have Sucker Punch staff come and essentially advise and assist with the development of this Ghost of Tsushima spinoff. And that makes sense to try and keep it kind of in line with what the standards are and how things are supposed to work and the mentality behind development. It all kind of, that makes sense to me. But, the studios were very busy. Specifically, obviously, this would be Sucker Punch. And according to the article, they were under a lot of pressure financially to perform. So they really couldn't, allow a lot of staff to go running around at other people's jobs because they need their help, keeping them alive. So that was shot down. Also, Ghost of Tsushima is something that Sucker Punch has kind of said that they have, nobody's going to be working on it but them. According to this, that was not an element in the decision, but hey. So Ghost of Tsushima spinoff shut down. So they're still trying to figure this out. They're making calls, and eventually this God of War trilogy was announced without Bluepoint's involvement. Obviously, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the big God of War trilogy being remade, but it was being remade at Sony Santa Monica Studios, not at Bluepoint, which at this point we've all kind of looked at as this remake studio because we've seen nothing else from them. And that's when the next week they were like, oh, frick. Like, this is not looking good. Like, why are they remaking a game from Sony's catalog without us? We're the remake studio. What? Nobody asked us about this? And they were shut down the next week. Yikes. So that's the story of Bluepoint. I think that there's a couple of really obvious elements here. When we go through, we splice through what's going on here. What the frick happened? There's a lot of weird... I mean, so I only stopped a couple of times throughout this story to really kind of give you a chance to be like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. I think I was trying to give you as an audience member, because I believe in you. I trust you. I think you're a smart person. You're listening to this podcast right now. You're a smart guy or woman. A really respectable woman that deserves equal rights to men. I think I have to say that. I think it's 2026. I think I'm required to say that, or else I'll be like lynched. But anyway, you are smart. You're smart. And you probably heard some of these things, and you probably said, what the frick? Like, why are they doing that? Why are they proposing that? That just doesn't sound smart. Like, isn't this a remake studio? Why are they saying they want to make their own game immediately after being bought by Sony? That's weird. That doesn't make sense. And then they're like, oh, well, the first thing we're going to pitch after the Bloodborne thing gets dropped is let's remake Shadow of the Colossus again. Do you not have faith that you can do anything else other than something you've already done? Why are you proposing another Shadow of the Colossus remake? A game that apparently, according to the leaker originally, did not sell enough to make money. It did not make money. I mean, I didn't buy Shadow of the Colossus remake. I had already played it. I didn't need it. It didn't seem like a big enough improvement, so I didn't buy it. A Ghost of Tsushima spinoff? Why are we proposing another new IP? You're the remake studio. So I feel like if you're a smart, intelligent listener, which I know you are, that I think you start looking at this and you start kind of clicking some things into place and you say, oh, Bluepoint was not being really utilized in the way I expected them to be utilized. Obviously, as a support studio, when they first got brought on, fine, whatever. It is what it is. They probably would be a decent support studio. So that's fine. I don't mind that. Immediately being put on a live service game, that's clear Sony mismanagement. Okay, clear Sony mismanagement. But it was Bluepoint who said, we want to work on our own IP. Okay? We want to go off and do our own thing immediately after being released from Sony, from being a support studio. They said, we really want to be making our own thing. Okay, so that is step one. Bluepoint is given autonomy, and they say, we want to do our own IP. Okay, cool. You're the remake studio. Why are you asking to do your own IP? I already, if I was at Sony, this is, if I was at Sony, I'd say we bought you to make remakes, and admittedly, you don't have to buy this studio and say you can only make remakes because truly they can obviously make their own games. But like I said, this was a studio that wasn't known for their design chops. It was known for being able to make remakes, right? So it had mainly talent kind of focused around that, not building up something like a design focus, like a new thing. So I would already be looking at Sony as Sony, and I would be like, I don't know about this. Like this just doesn't seem right. But leadership at the time, I guarantee you started salivating a little bit, and they said, ooh, new IP. Well, you can be a part of our live service initiative. We just so happen to be pushing a lot of live service games right now, and you can start making your own new IP as a live service game. So in that case, I kind of see everybody getting what they want. They have, Bluepoint's been itching to make their own game. Sony says, cool, we will help you make this new game, but it's got to be live service. So sure, that kills morale, but it is what it is. From what I understand, this did not lead to massive turnover or anything like that. It just basically made people say, I really don't want to do this. And I get it. But like this was kind of a bargain with the devil, a deal with the devil, if you really want to say it like that. You get to make your own IP, but it's got to be a live service game. Like it sucks, but like it is what it is, and they're the boss, right? So like you can't really say anything about that. So at this point, I really see two people who are at fault. Obviously, Sony trying to force Bluepoint to make a live service game, right? But then you also have Bluepoint who's saying we want to do something different, which is just weird, right? So you have that. Okay. That's already kind of a weird move in a lot of ways. So eventually the game gets shut down because, of course, it was going to get shut down. If Naughty Dog's live service game isn't making it to the storefront, yours sure as frick isn't. You can't do jack other than remake games, okay? So that doesn't get worked out. Fine. So they go to do Bloodborne. That's the obvious win for them. They get effed. They get absolutely screwed over. Miyazaki's like, no, you cannot do that. Okay? I would say as Sony, sure, great, you guys. We knew that you would do a great Bloodborne remake. We have sure faith that that would have been the case. But we can't do it. We need something else from you guys. At this point, I would say FromSoft needs to come back with a surefire banger. They have so many other games from Sony's catalog to pull from. They now have full access, because at this point, they had not made a remake with Sony without being bought by them. So, like, they've never made a game under Sony's banner before. So they now have access to all of Sony's IP. And they go with Shadow of the Colossus. a game that they have already remade. And they say, we would love to do Shadow of the Colossus again. What? Like, you have so many other games that you can choose from, and your big swing is we want to make the same game again. If I was Sony, I would start looking around and being like, are you not confident that you can do literally anything else? Like literally anything else? Because that seems like you are not very like confident in basically doing anything that you've already done, right? And then they say, okay, fine. We won't do a remake. We'll do another new IP. Bro, we just had this conversation. We bought you to be the remake studio. We bought you to be the remake studio, and you want to do another new game? Because that worked out real well with that God of War IP. Obviously, this is me talking as Sony. I'm saying as if I was an exec. Because obviously that God of War IP was never going to work out because it was a live service game, so duh. But I think it really clearly made Sony lose faith in them that they couldn't produce. But I think majority of Sony's studios have not been able to produce on live service games, so I think that's a little unfair. So let's assume that maybe Sony didn't do that. But I would, based on the way this went, is they were immediately shut down after that. So I think it probably did. So then they get shut down. So what I hear is a studio that basically is pitching me a bunch of games that I don't know why they pitched those games, the remakes specifically. The only other game that I can see them remaking is Bloodborne. If I'm a Sony exec, the only other game that I know that they're going to want to remake is Bloodborne, and Bloodborne's off the table. The only other game that they seem to be pitching me right now is Shadow of the Colossus, a game that they've already remade, which is just silly, or a new IP, which we don't think that they have the talent to do. Shut them down. I think that is... So I understand the thought process from Sony. I think Bluepoint clearly, like, what the frick are you doing? Like, what are you doing? This is you're heavily pushing making new IP, and you're also heavily pushing these remakes that are obviously going to get shut down. Now, at that time, of course, they didn't know Bloodborne was going to get shut down. But, like, Shadow of the Colossus, again? No, obviously. Obviously. Even with the updates, I think it was an obvious no. Apparently, the original Shadow of the Colossus remake did not do well. Obvious no. So, what I see here is Bluepoint was kind of flailing. Bluepoint clearly was not leaning into their own strengths, which is silly, right? It's just silly. And then what I would also then fold back on is, what the frick is Sony doing not proposing a God of War trilogy remake to Bluepoint? Like, the obvious answer for Sony here is to just say, hey, Bluepoint, here, we're going to throw you a bone. God of War trilogy. We want that remade. Here you go. Why did Sony Santa Monica, their premier studio that clearly their resources could be used somewhere else, why are they being given this project that you have a remake studio that is known for remakes? Why is this not being given to them? You're now utilizing one of your most prized studios. A lot of their resources are going into a remake, when you have a studio that's clearly very prominent in that space. Makes no sense. So, basically, at the end of the day, what is the story here? The story is both of these mother effers are stupid as frick. I think is the real crowning jewel moment that we have to really hone in on is Sony effed up with Bluepoint in multiple regards. I say giving them a live service game was stupid as frick. Obviously dumb move. And then not proposing a freaking remake for them when they're floundering and trying to find a new job and giving it to one of your big studios. Yeah, also stupid. Also a dumb move. Bluepoint on the opposite end of the coin. Yeah, stupid to just immediately be like, "Yeah, I want to work on new IP" when you're the remake studio. Yeah, probably a bad move. Oh, proposing Shadow of the Colossus as the remake that's going to, keep them going after Bloodborne got shot down. Yeah, probably a bad move. Probably a bad move. I still think that Bloodborne. Bluepoint is a incredibly talented studio. I think they've proven that. I think that they're just really good at specifically remaking games, and that's so. I guess they clearly wanted to be more than that. They wanted to kind of flex their muscles as a creative and show off. Yeah, we can play with the big boys too. We're not just somebody who's like, you know, taking somebody else's work and just kind of polishing it up and putting it out. I really never looked at Bluepoint like that though. Like I really did respect Bluepoint as a port house, more or less, like as a very glorified port house. I think Demon Souls cemented them as a studio that has a lot of talent and can make really good products. Not just these glorified HD remakes, like they can really make something quite good. And I don't know why they weren't treated that way. I don't know why I don't know why they felt like they needed to step outside of that box either though, right? Like I mean, and I understand you want to have your own thing, you want to flex your creative chops. I get it, but I think you also need to recognize, where your strengths are, and maybe they just never really had a chance to do that. And maybe if they did get that Ghost of Tsushima spinoff, that they would have been able to show, like, yeah, we're really better at doing what Sucker Punch does than Sucker Punch. I don't think they would. I don't think so at all. I think you were going to be looking at a Ghost of Tsushima spinoff that was going to be a B tier Ghost of Tsushima. I don't foresee at any point they were going to outperform another game that they were doing a spinoff of. So I don't know. It seems like I think the pulling the plug on them was clearly premature. They clearly could have been given a much better run, a much better chance. But that I think it was a little silly to do that. I think both sides have clearly made some missteps, and it led to a studio closure that I think was again a little premature. And it shows that Sony is willing to close studios though. So willing to close promising studios as well. So I would start looking around with my head on a swivel at Sony, and I'd say, "Oh, am I a studio that maybe could be a problem? Like, am I a problem child? Am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Because Sony will kill us. They will have some heads roll, and that's really unfortunate. Because I think a lot of Sony's studios seem to be doing pretty well, but I think there's a couple of them out there, Bend, Media Molecule, that could be on the chopping block. Could be a problem. But I don't know. I don't know that for sure. But I think again, Sony is making some really questionable decisions, and I would expect that to continue in a way, unfortunately. Speaking of making unfortunate decisions, these are the result, and our next story is the result of many, 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 many poor decisions in a row. So, in what I would consider to be the top story of the week, in fact, insanity, in my opinion. Phil Spencer of Xbox retires, Sarah Bond resigns, and Asha Sharma will be the new CEO of Microsoft Gaming, with Matt Booty promoted to Chief Content Officer. Wow. Pour one out for Philly. Phil Spencer, longtime head of Xbox at Microsoft, Sarah Bond, the president, both out in a very dramatic shift in leadership here. This is it. This was some. I've honestly been. I'm interested to see where this conversation goes with on this podcast, because there's so many threads. There's so many threads to go down here. There's so many angles to attack this from in terms of conversation. And I've obviously got the freaking flu. I'm high on freaking cough medicine. And I'm intimidated. I'm intimidated by this conversation, because you could easily have this one bullet point could be hours of conversation. Obviously, Xbox has been in a way for quite some time. It has been floundering. It has been trying to shift to a Game Pass xCloud model, and it has not been well. It has not been doing well. It has not been convincing a lot of people. And I think the obvious straw that broke the camel's back is the Activision Blizzard acquisition, being one of the biggest acquisitions of all time. In fact, I believe the biggest acquisition of all time. Not even video games, just like in terms of what they paid, the biggest acquisition ever. And yeah, that got that got governments to look at them and say, hey, what the frick? Like, you kind of seem like a monopoly over there. Maybe you shouldn't be buying such a massive company when you're already a massive company. And it took them a long time, many years, a lot of scrutiny legally to get that passed. I think it took them a lot longer than they thought. It took them a lot more money than they thought. And it got, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, to start looking at them and saying, what the frick are you doing over there, spending all my money and getting me in all this legal trouble? You better be making me some real good cash, making me some moolah. And essentially, that was not happening. Call of Duty was acquired. It was supposed to increase Game Pass numbers substantially, and I do not believe it happened, which is crazy, right? You would think that would be obvious. The biggest game in the world, the highest selling game every year. And of course, this year, not the case. Call of Duty was outsold by Battlefield, which is a first in a very, very long time. This year's Call of Duty was considered a complete and utter failure. So not a good look. Obviously, Xbox Studios have been producing lukewarm game after lukewarm game. None of their games have necessarily, well, I say none of. Some of their games have absolutely flopped significantly. But none of their games have been massive successes, I suppose, is the best way to phrase that. So not looking good. It just has not been looking good over at Xbox. Now we have these massive price increases to Game Pass, something that was originally such a good deal, so wonderful for consumers. I've been a massive champion of in the past years. obviously not as much anymore. The price on Xbox Game Pass has gone up so high it is hard to recommend to anyone anymore. So they've also tried killing off their Xbox consoles. Obviously, they still have a box in the works, but for the next generation, but nobody wants to buy those things right now. It is hard to convince any consumer to get in on this because they are clearly abandoning it. Why would you buy a bunch of Xbox stuff right now when this platform is clearly dissolving? It's clearly dying, and they've stated as much. It's been a clear and utter failure on Phil Spencer's part. It is obvious that this was coming. I am surprised that it took this long. I'm surprised it took this long. And it's so odd too, right? Because Phil Spencer has always been seen as this incredibly charming, incredibly charismatic gamer's gamer. And that seems to be the general consensus I'm hearing from everybody who I've heard interviews from him, anything, is like, oh, dude, Phil Spencer's great. He's such a wonderful guy. Love him. What a charismatic guy. He's a real gamer. He's not just some guy who's up there talking PR nonsense. He's a real gamer. And oh man, I just respect him so much. And bro, if that is fair, I mean, I believe it. And he really does come across as very charming, very charismatic, and a gamer. But I hate what this means. Is I think everybody is now looking at Phil Spencer and saying gamers should not run a business. They clearly are incapable of running a business. You need a businessman to run a business. And I think it's very obvious that we will get better stuff as a gamer if you have a gamer who's making decisions for gamers, right? That should make the most sense, right? If you have some dude who's like, well, we just need to milk gamers for every dollar they're worth, that's when I think you're going to get into a point of that's a problem for gamers, right? And that's what a businessman is going to do. Obviously, Phil was never our friend. He was always trying to get money from us. But it's undeniable that Game Pass was a step in the right direction in terms of consumer. Obviously not anymore that the price is uptick to frick, but at the time I saw Game Pass as a huge win for gamers everywhere. That was an initial Game Pass thing. Absolutely is a major win for gamers everywhere. Xbox X Cloud, I think, is, gaming everywhere. Again, a major step in the right direction for gamers everywhere. I think you can't deny that having games available anywhere and everywhere is a great thing. Absolutely. And, I don't know how much I love these acquisitions that Xbox did. But Phil Spencer was very vocal, and it was very obvious to a detriment that he was very forgiving and very open to hey, you do whatever the frick you want. We want you to do whatever you think is a good game. We want you to make that. And that is crazy. And it's so funny too to hear gamers be like, yo, Phil Spencer should have stepped in and killed all this stuff. Why did Phil Spencer not just murder everything that he had when he bought all these studios? He should have just shut them all down. It's what the frick? We for so long, gamers would always cry oh my gosh, just let the developers do what they want. Let them make good games. Don't step in and say they have to have loot boxes and they have to have microtransactions and they have to have shoehorned multiplayer. These are all stupid business decisions that some corporate executives said they had to have, and yada yada yada. That was the rallying cry for gamers for years. And now we have Phil Spencer, who freaking is a gamer and listened to you mother effers and said, hey, They're right. We need gamers. We need these developers to make games. Just let them make games. Let them produce games. Let them make. We believe in our developers. Let them do what they want. And then they produce garbage. And like what the frick was that game from Arcane, the vampire game? Like Blood something, Blood Fang. I don't even remember. But it was like a freaking 33 on Metacritic or something. Some abysmal score. Still think that is an absurdly low score. Did not deserve that score. Like that's a score for a game that like didn't even function correctly. I think that's a little beyond what that game was. It was just kind of broken. But anyway, that studio was like, well, when we got acquired by Microsoft, we were actually excited because we thought they were going to cancel this game. And Phil Spencer came in and said, no, like, I believe in you guys. You guys can keep doing it. And I was just like, bro, oh my gosh. Like, that's so sad. That's so sad that Phil Spencer is like this altruistic gamer. And he's just like, no, I believe in the developers. And the developers themselves are like, no, this game sucks. We need you to cancel it. Please, for the love of God, cancel it. And it's like, yeah, a businessman would have come in and listened and looked at it and said, hey, this game sucks. We have to cancel it. Like there's no way you can turn this around. We're canceling it. And it's so weird to see a world in which, yeah, a gamer who just believes in developers and just said, yeah, dude, freaking let it ride. Absolutely. Is the bad guy. Is the one who made the wrong choice. That's crazy. That is insanity to me. I can't believe that. And it's so sad, right? And so now we have an AI lead, a president of AI coming in and taking over. Oh man. So there you got it. You got your businesswoman. You got your businesswoman coming in, and she's going to be the one on top now. And she's going to be making the decisions, and she ain't no gamer. She absolutely ain't no gamer. We'll get that in a second. I think the next thing here is filing off of Phil Spencer. We have Sarah Bond. Sarah Bond, the lovely lady president of Xbox. So Phil Spencer was CEO, president. She kind of was the girl making things happen. She would be executing the orders, per se. Sarah Bond was what everybody assumed would be the next CEO of Microsoft Games. It seemed like that was the obvious heir apparent, as everyone is saying. And I mean, I think that was fairly obvious to everybody. She was very public facing. She had the title to say that. And Phil Spencer seemed like he could have been on the way out. Sure. So, like, it just kind of made sense, right? So, Sarah Bond resigns. So now what we assumed this basically Phil Spencer, I'm not going to say 2.0. Sarah Bond was never considered really a gamer, but Phil Spencer's, somebody who probably Phil Spencer was building up as a replacement is now gone. Well, what happened obviously is she was overlooked for the promotion and she was pissed and left. This is no surprise. If I was working for a big promotion and I was up in Microsoft like that, and the time came for me to get that job, and they said, well, not only are you not getting that job, and we kind of led you to believe that you may have been the best person for it, but like we're giving it to someone else. It's clearly a snub. It's clearly a snub. It's clearly like we really didn't like what you were doing. Like we don't think you would be a very good fit for this job anymore. And what that says to me is my time here is over. And look, bro, I got Microsoft president on my freaking resume. I can go wherever the frick I want. Like there will be people foaming at the mouth to give me massive power at another company. Absolutely. No doubt. So of course you leave. It just makes the most sense. And here's the funniest thing is that Sarah Bond was actually considered to be not that likable behind the scenes at Microsoft. It seems to be fairly widely reported at this point that, I mean, which I had never heard this prior to this particular, her resigning, but it seems like everybody's talking about it now, is like, oh yeah, Sarah Bond was essentially, rolling it back a little bit, she was in charge of the Xbox Everything is an Xbox campaign, which if you hadn't seen it was an ad where essentially everything, this is an Xbox. It would show a phone and it would say this is an Xbox, and it would show a TV and it would show this is an Xbox, and so on and so forth. Essentially signifying Xbox is not a console anymore. It's just a thing. It's you can have an Xbox. Everything is an Xbox. It's a platform. Xbox is now a platform. This apparently pissed off a lot of people inside Xbox. They did not like it. Um, Bro, this was probably something that was signed off on. Sarah Bond seems to be taking a lot of the fall here. People pretty openly have said like, well, yeah, she was very difficult to work with. I think still, she must have been real freaking difficult to work with because pretty much nobody thanks her for her service. I mean, like, it was a pretty, in my opinion, she was done dirty. Like, Phil Spencer is the only person who really says anything about her in their letters. So I read all their letters, by the way, and we'll be going through a little bit of them in a second. But like, every single person involved in this, had basically a public statement. So Matt Booty had a letter, Phil Spencer and Asha Sharma, and then Satya Nadella all had letters. None of them reference Sarah Bond except for Phil Spencer, who will obviously no longer be with the company. So he has nothing better to do than just throw her name in there and just say, yeah, thank you, Sarah, for all you've done. Matt Booty doesn't even say anything about Sarah. Like, woof. Like clearly her resignation was on bad terms, and like, everybody is throwing out, well, Sarah Bond, she effed up the Xbox Everything is Xbox, this is an Xbox campaign, and pissed everybody off. And I'm like, well, Phil Spencer probably signed off on that. Like, there were probably several approvals behind that whole thing. Maybe Sarah Bond was not very good at executing it, and maybe was difficult to work with when executing it. But like, I don't know. It does seem like Sarah Bond is taking the fall for a lot of this. She seems to be like the one everybody's pointing a gun at and is like, well, really, Sarah Bond, like, oh, what the frick, Sarah Bond, like that. I think seems a little bit silly. That she seems to be the boogeyman here, but at the same time, it seems like nobody really liked her. It seems like she did not have a very good relationship with most people in this organization for whatever reason. I've only heard the general terms of she was very difficult to work with, which, bro, in layman's terms, like, to me that means that girl was mean as frick. Like, that's what I hear when I hear, oh, well, I've heard she was difficult to work with. It's like, oh, well, this girl probably freaking pulled some people in a freaking closet and freaking punched them in the stomach or something. Like, that's kind of like where probably started berating them with like slurs or something like that. Like, that's kind of where my mind goes when I hear somebody say that, because otherwise, there's probably more direct ways to say, like, well, yeah, she was just kind of annoying or something like that, difficult to work with. Yeesh, that's some HR violation bullcrap right there, in code. Difficult to work with. But yeah, I mean, I think Sarah Bond is definitely the one who kind of comes off as like the getting the real short end of the stick in this situation. Greg Miller of Kind of Funny also reported that this was not planned. I am not sure exactly what he's referring to here, so we also had, this was a rushed announcement, by the way. Sarah Bond, kind of tying into that, had a LinkedIn post go up like 3 hours before the announcement was made or something like that, talking about how she like loved Xbox or whatever. This is obviously her team doing this, and it was a scheduled post, so nothing crazy. But like they didn't know this was going to be announced the way it was. Apparently, IGN got the scoop prior to them being ready to say it, and basically it just got kind of dropped from there. So I'm not sure if that's what Greg Miller was talking about, but I think basically what Greg Miller was saying is this entire retirement, quote unquote, was not planned. And I would have to think that has to be fair. I think it seems like, okay, so what we know is Phil Spencer took kind of a sabbatical for a long time. At a point, people were frustrated they weren't getting approvals for weeks because he was out for a while. That was kind of the assumption that like maybe he was at that point considering, okay, I should maybe wrap it up. I should hang up my coat and tie on this particular endeavor. And then he apparently had been talking about it with, according to his statement, talking about it with Nadella for Satya Nadella for since the fall of the previous year. So a little bit of time to try and get that figured out. It just seems like it's an abrupt change for that though. Phil will be staying on as an advisor for some time to help with the transition. So will Sarah Bond for like 3 weeks, I think, for Sarah, but it's a much longer time for Phil. But like I don't know. It does seem kind of chaotic, and I know that the announcement was made chaotic by the fact they had to kind of push it out, but it just seems like this was probably something that had been pissing off management, specifically the CEO of Microsoft, for quite some time, and had been a thorn in their side for quite some time. And they probably just said, "Get the frick out!" like there's, I don't know how you're turning this around, which. Speaking of which, we move on to Asha Sharma, our new lead of Xbox, our new Xbox CEO in chief. So she is a previous executive at Meta, specifically Instacart. She's on the board of Home Depot. She is a businesswoman through and through. She's been on multiple big tech companies, executives, before going to Microsoft, and she is now over in AI, or she was in AI, a president over AI in Microsoft. So she's now coming over to here to be the gamer girl. So it's very funny because very shortly after they put out her gamer tag and they were like, yeah, here, she's a real gamer. And that, I think that's something they just felt like they had to do because Phil has always been very open about like, here's what I'm playing, here's my gamer tag, you can check my score. And then Asha comes out and she's like, yeah, I'll play Borderlands 2. And it's like they got some intern to play Borderlands 2 for like 20 minutes and got an achievement and then put it down for the day. Like that's kind of what we're dealing with here. So that was a little minor controversy when she first came in. But yes, so she is coming in from AI. Oh, the wonders of AI. Microsoft is obviously heavily invested in AI, massively invested in AI, and they are obviously going to try to be pushing that across all of their units. I would assume already Microsoft Xbox had been using AI to help develop games. Maybe not most of the recent ones that have come out, but like I think any game probably from here on out had a touch of AI in it at some point. It just makes the most sense. Why wouldn't they? Like they're pushing it so hard at Microsoft. They have to. They have to be pushing it across all their orgs. It just makes the most sense to me. So in her letter to her commitment to Xbox, what she plans to do, she had many things to say, and I'm not going to say most of them because most of them are just clear corporate spiel, schlock, garbage. This is her just saying what she feels like she has to say. She says she's going to commit to the Xbox brand. She says the box itself is important. The console itself will live on. And maybe that's them saying, hey, maybe Game Pass was a bad idea. We're maybe going back and forth on that a little bit internally. Possibly. I don't know. But that's some of the things she said. The main thing that stood out to me is that she would say that she's not going to make AI slop, but she will be connecting AI into games. So AI slop is very different than AI. I think I've gone on record on this podcast saying, look, AI in terms of a creative capacity is not all bad. It is certainly not as good as human-made art, and that is something that Miss Asha asserts as well, is that humans make the best art. It is very surprising to hear her say this, but she does say it. So it's very surprisingly. And she says, no AI slop. Well, that is very subjective. What is AI slop? The fact that she even admits that there is such thing as slop in AI is very surprising, because Satya Nadella has been on record as saying that he does not believe that AI is slop. He doesn't like that term. He thinks it's not accurate to what AI does, and that AI is better than that. I don't know. He's very bullish, very, very, very bullish on AI. So, she's essentially coming in and saying, hey, look, we will be using AI, but we won't be producing AI slop. Okay. So I believe that is what I'm going to say. They will not be pushing out something that looks like Will Smith eating spaghetti. Okay. But they will be using AI to help code their games, to help produce their content. And here's where I kind of look. Is one of her major statements that she kind of inserts along with this AI, bit statement, is that she wants both developers and players to make their own games using AI. Guess what I hear when I hear that? I hear Roblox. I hear Fortnite. I hear user-generated content is what she sees the future of Xbox being with AI. Ooh, I don't know about that. That's tricky, right? But I think if I was an AI exec and I had to go to Satya Nadella and he said, what do you want to do with the Xbox brand? And he was big into AI, and I obviously am coming from an AI place, and I say, look, we can have a mother effer just code a game and we can make a platform on it, and it'll be like our Roblox. Roblox is one of the biggest gaming platforms in the world. So is Fortnite. And we can make a profit off of user-generated content, making games using AI. I think that would be the obvious play. Just to throw that out there. You do one of two things, obviously. You'd say, well, we can use AI to produce either better games or, more games for Game Pass. That would be my first strategy that I would propose. Second strategy would, I think, be a lot more bullish, is, we basically make a Roblox. We make a platform for gamers to make games for themselves or for others. And that it seems crazy to me, because I don't think our technology is anywhere near close enough to produce that kind of content. You can vibe code a game, sure, but you still have to kind of know how to do that. I don't think it's at a place where just a layman like my dad can't go in and freaking vibe code a freaking video game. Like not all of a humanity can do that. I don't think a child would be able to do that. Which is people in Roblox and stuff like that. I think that there's a lot of barriers to entry to that kind of technology, to that kind of production that maybe Microsoft can make a lot more streamlined. Perhaps. But I think it would be difficult, and I think it will take a long time before it gets to something like, oh yeah, more than an Angry Birds, or more. I think Angry Birds is honestly a little bit sophisticated. More than a Flappy Bird was actually what I was thinking of. We can vibe code Flappy Bird, or basically, if you're having trouble visualizing, essentially, what ChatGPT is. You can put things into ChatGPT and it spits out your answers in text or an image even. And what if you could do that with a video game? What if you could say, make me a Flappy Bird game where the bird is actually a coconut or whatever the frick, and now you're playing Flappy Coconut. And it's like, okay, this is my dream game. This is all what I've always wanted. Why didn't they ever make Flappy Coconut? And, that's essentially what I would assume they're wanting to do. But I would say, they want it to get to a point where you can be like, make a Gears of War game, but X, Y, and Z. And then a Gears of War game is produced before your eyes. Like, that is so far down the line. Like, we are easily a decade away from that. Easily. And, maybe they're shooting for the moon on this. There's some moonshot theory here they're trying to go for. I feel like we are still in the infancy of AI in general, yet alone generated video games to that scale. So, that is such a moonshot. It's really far out there. So, I mean, and I don't know. Maybe that's not what she's saying. But when I hear an AI executive say that, that's what I hear. That's what my mind goes to. And I would be very surprised if I'm wrong with at least that general idea. So I think that's what you're looking at for this. She says a lot more stuff that just sounds like basically fluff. Oh, we're still going to make great games made by humans. We're still going to, we're going to go back to the Xbox. One of the co-founders of Xbox came out. This was a big quote. Was that really Asha is coming in to be a palliative care doctor, which I think is a very strong statement, right? And he essentially said, this girl is coming in to basically kill off Xbox. And I think there's some logic to that statement, to be quite fair. To be quite truthful, I think that there is some logic to it. I think, what is Xbox really doing to benefit Microsoft? Where does Xbox really fit into the larger Xbox or Microsoft ecosystem? This huge thing now, because of Xbox, because of Blizzard specifically, Activision Blizzard King, because of this huge albatross around their neck that is costing them so much money to support. What is it really benefiting them? Their Xbox console is pretty much dead. Game Pass did not take off. So you have two routes here, or three really. You try to make Game Pass work, which it clearly isn't going to at this point. It's struggling to survive. I mean, it's making money, but nowhere near as much as they want it to. You try to bring back the console, but you are now at such an uphill battle for that. Oh my gosh. How are you going to make it through that? To convince people to come back to the Xbox after you basically just spent a decade or, half a decade trying to convince them to essentially leave it. This is a dead brand. This is a dead platform. You don't need to be invested in this platform. Don't be. Go buy a PlayStation. Go get a PC. That's what we prefer you to do. That to me, I think is a real uphill battle that you really have to invest in and you really have to commit to even get a monicum of your support back, so you can try to go the route of a PlayStation or a Nintendo where you're getting 30% of every transaction that comes through your store, that kind of recurring revenue. Or you sell off the stuff that you don't need anymore, which is your studios. You're now the biggest publisher in the world. and you have some of the most expensive studios in the world under your head, under your branch. Well, you get rid of them, you know? Well, you have a bunch of studios that suck. We'll get rid of them. You have a bunch of studios that aren't acting right. We get rid of them. Like, I think that's the palliative care I think I would see. And then once you get rid of all of these studios for Xbox, well, what do you have? If you get rid of an Activision Blizzard, if you get rid of a Bethesda, if you get rid of all these other guys, you boil it down to what Xbox was before they started acquiring all of these massive studios. What do you have? Well, you have a studio that'll make a Halo and a studio that'll make a Gears and yada yada yada, like it used to be. Very few games. And then, okay, well, now you don't really have an incentive to make Game Pass work. And you really don't have a very large incentive to make a console work, really. Because what's going to bring people back to your console? Exclusives. And now you don't have exclusives. I think Xbox has really put themselves in a rock and a hard place situation that makes it really hard to think of any way to make this work. So when you put it like that, yeah, why would you bring anybody in other than just to kill it? Just wind it down. But at that point, why even have a palliative care, Just freaking kill it. Sell everything off for pieces and say it's over. I mean, it sucks. You'll lose a lot of goodwill, but like, what are you losing goodwill for? A dead brand? Like, are people going to stop using Microsoft 365 or freaking Windows operating system because they were pissed off at Xbox? Probably not. They kind of have a monopoly on that, it's their one and only consumer-facing brand, really, and I mean, maybe that makes Microsoft have a good like public face, but I don't know if they need that. It's not like Google has that, Google doesn't have a major. I mean, I guess technically Google, the search engine, would be their public-facing brand, but I mean, I don't even think that would really be considered that. So I don't know. It seems like that's a possibility, right? It seems like that's a possibility. I'm willing to see where she goes. It very much seems like, and she's even said, the plan's the plan until it's not. That was also something that she's come out in interviews and said. So essentially stating, look, we are still trying to figure this out. We still don't really know what we're going to do, and we're going to be playing it by ear and trying to figure out what to do. I would be very scared. I would be very scared if I was living in Microsoft right now. If I was in Microsoft land, that would be a scary place to be because it's you don't know what's happening. You don't know what's happening. It's easy to kind of say like I think. There's no way to really know. All I can say is there will be a big AI push. Obviously, Satya Nadella is a big AI believer, and he obviously just put a huge AI believer in charge because she just came from AI. So guess what? This is good. You're going to see a lot of AI in Microsoft games, or at least in products from them on their gaming sphere. No duh. So, I mean, this is a massive shakeup. It's a massive shakeup. I mean, like, this is, I think, really the culmination of what we all foresaw happening over the past, literally since Phil Spencer took charge. And it sucks. And I said this earlier, and I will say it again. It sucks that Phil Spencer is a gamer and he made moves for gamers and they didn't pan out. They didn't pan out. They ended up being the wrong moves, and it's really easy to look back now and say like, yeah, dude, you shouldn't have done that. That was stupid. And then at the same time, I look at that and I say, but he was doing what he thought was right. And I think from a gamer's perspective, I think a gamer would have said that was the right call to make too. It's just not the right business decision. And it sucks that the gamers' decisions are not the right business decisions a lot of the time. And sometimes gamers don't say what's right, even though it seems obvious to us. Oh yeah, just let the developers do what they want. Just give them as much freedom as they want, and they'll make good games. That is pie in the sky mentality. We've clearly been taught that you need somebody to rein it in. You need somebody to kind of wrangle the cats in a way and make sure that they're doing the right things. And like sometimes we just talked about Bluepoint, and we were just talking about like, well, clearly there were some freaking wrong moves made there, and it wasn't the right moves for gamers, and it wasn't the right moves for the studio. And in this case, I think it was the right move for gamers, and it ended up being the wrong move for everybody. And that sucks. That sucks. And I salute Phil Spencer for what he tried to do. He made massive changes in the industry that I think are benefiting most people in it. But I think that he made some really big mess ups, some really big screw ups, and you can't get around it. And I think Xbox has been bleeding money. He made massive, like the biggest changes to the industry we've ever seen. And they didn't pay off. And when you're going to be making such a massive change, when you're swinging so hard, you cannot miss. And he missed. And it sucks. It sucks major balls. And now we have an AI lead in charge of this, and I don't know what to think about it. She's a businesswoman, and it's really just going to take time to see. But like, I'm very interested to see where she goes with this. I want to see where she's taking the brand, because I think nobody knows what to do with it right now. I think nobody knows what to do with it, and I think she's going to be frickin' flying by the seat of her pants for a lot of her decisions, to be quite honest. And I'm interested to see what happens. But that is another reason not to buy an Xbox, if you were thinking about it. But that is all. We only have 2 news stories for this week, because I've spent 45 minutes talking about each one of them, because they're so big. I had a couple of other stories that I considered on the docket. Sony pushing back PlayStation 6 to 2028, 2029. Honestly, like, what more do you say? You just say, yeah, I mean, could be coming out later. There was so many threads to pull from. There's so many. But that's, I think, all I have to say on it. Thank God I don't have like 3 other people on this podcast trying to, well, maybe it'd be a really good thing if I did, because then people would tell me to shut the frick up. But that's all I have to say on that, at least for right now. God willing. All right. So enough about the news, or the 2 news stories, really. We're on to impressions. And this week we have an interesting way of doing impressions. We have Steam Next Fest. Steam Next Fest was very prominent over the past, I think it's still going, actually. But I checked out a lot of demos, put them on my Steam Deck. If you ran on my Steam Deck, you were good to go. But I played a lot of demos. I wanted to get some impressions in. I wanted to try out some things, and I decided to give a shot to Denshattack. Now, Denshattack was my most anticipated game, or I think my second most anticipated game of this year. If you listened to my Game of the Year show, you would know that I was really looking forward to Denshattack. The trailers that I've seen have been crazy, super energetic, super high speed, wowza, kind of stuff. Anime inspired, obviously. Denshattack. Densha is a train in Japanese, so it's obviously a combination of Densha and attack to get the title there. And I played the demo. What did I think? Did I think it's still my most anticipated game of the year? No. I don't know. I'm definitely a little bit lower on it now. What I was kind of expecting it to be was more like a Sonic the Hedgehog, like a modern Sonic the Hedgehog in a way, and be super over the top, super crazy, like you saw stuff like riding on a Ferris wheel and stuff like that. Is that in this game? Is that in the demo? Yes. Is it as crazy as I really wanted it to be. Obviously, the concept is fine. It's really more of like a Twitch quick time event game with a combination of like Tony Hawk, like the trick system in Tony Hawk. And I actually hate the trick system in Tony Hawk. I guess that's what people like about Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I've never been into it. Comboing tricks quickly and, moving the analog stick around and, not doing it before you hit the ground. I don't know. I've never been into it. It's never been my thing. So having this be a major focus for the game was kind of a turnoff for me because I'm just not a huge Tony Hawk guy. Um, I didn't think the demo got as crazy as I wanted to see it get. There's a lot of like you need to play these levels multiple times to perfect them, to up your score, to do better on tricks and find bonuses and stuff like that. It's definitely a high replay kind of game. I don't love that. I like a game that encourages replay, sure, but I like having the ability to go through a level the first time and not get like a freaking F grade, and then like you have to go back and like master the level in order to get a good grade. Like I understand games that promote mastery, like a Neon White or something like that, and I think that you know there's definite merit to that, and there's definite appeal, and I enjoy those games occasionally, but I prefer a game that I can go through and do well on the first time through, because I don't have enough time to replay a game or replay a singular stage like 5 times in order to get a good grade on it. So like I don't I understand people who are looking for that. It's not something I'm looking for. I also thought a lot of the like craziness and gameplay within the game was just kind of Twitch based. So like, am I looking forward to Denshattack? Sure. Do I see it as a less desirable game now than I initially did? Yes. So like again, I'm looking at it as more like a 7.5 now, whereas I earlier was looking at it like an 8.5. It's just, and I'm not even saying it's bad. It's just not the game I wanted. And we'll kind of get into a game that I did want later on this list, but that's kind of my general feel right now for Denshattack. Next was The Eternal Life of Goldman. The Eternal Life of Goldman is a 2D platformer, or 2.5D platformer, technically. And it is all hand drawn. It is beautiful. It is a cartoony art style. With a weird and wacky world. You are essentially playing a storybook being told by a mother to her child who is like dying of a terminal illness or something like that. You kind of get into that as the demo progresses. It is a very long demo, 90 minutes, and the demo even opens and is like, this is a hunky demo. It's a 90-minute demo, so like you're gonna be here a minute, so like chill, like get used to it. You are playing as Goldman, an old man. Didn't didn't think that was gonna say it like that, but yeah, it's an old Goldman is an old man, and he is kind of reminiscent of like DuckTales, if you remember the old classic NES game DuckTales, where you're hopping around on Scrooge's cane. That's what you're doing in The Eternal Life of Goldman. It's kind of your main interaction with the vast majority of the world is through your cane. You can swap out components of your cane that you get throughout the game to kind of solve puzzles and swap on. Like one of the things you get is like a high jump cane part, and you have to like sometimes swap that out because jumping too high you'll hit spikes on a ceiling or something like that. um it was a pretty solid demo. What really clearly stands out in this game is the art style. The world is beautiful. It's kind of insane to me how much detail is in everything. The foreground, the background, the it's just what the player is running on currently. Like it is really something. It is really something. I was having to traverse multiple areas within the game, kind of backtracking, going from place to place. there's I think my main complaint about this demo was the text. There is a lot of reading that's not voiced in this for some reason. There still is voice acting, but it's only when the mom is talking to the child as narration, which is also a weird kind of juxtaposition because it's not like, Princess Bride where he's like, "Please, mummy, I want to hear more of the story." It's not like that. And I don't think Princess Bride has like a British kid, but like, you get it. It's not like a whimsical, like, "Oh, I just want to hear one more chapter, mummy, please." It's not that. It's like, "Mom, why is the lady coming in and sticking me with the needle that makes me go sleepy by?" And she's like, "Because you're dying, Jimmy." And she's like, "Why do you lie to me about how I'm dying, mommy? Because mommy can't handle it, Jimmy." Like that's that's the kind of narration you're getting from the Eternal Life of Goldman. Like it's very almost depressing, like narration that's telling a very compelling story, but it's so at odds with what you're viewing, which is like this weird, whimsical world, cartoony world. That it's like, what the frick is going? Like, why did we decide to go with this? That really just totally just does not match. Um, but overall, like, it was a solid platformer. Again, the thing about demos is it's always so easy for me to be like, "Oh yeah, this looks really good," and then like, you play it for more than 3 more hours, and you're like, "Oh well, it never really does anything else good, or it takes a really drastic turn that like yada yada yada." I think Eternal Life of Goldman looks pretty good. Here's the problem with Eternal Life of Goldman is it's coming from a really bad developer. This is the same developer that made This Is the Police, 1 and 2, both of which are like a 66 on Metacritic, so not very well reviewed at all. So this is a developer that has a track record for making not great games. And they're making Eternal Life of Goldman, which looks really good. Like I don't have much to complain about with this game, in all honesty. A lot of it is just really solid. Platforming is pretty solid. It looks amazing. Like it really is like a visual treat. So like I am skeptical just because of the developer, and I don't know. I'm holding my breath on the Eternal Life of Goldman, but I mean, everything I've seen up to this point, it has potential to be something pretty solid. So I mean, I think it's going to review better than a 66, certainly. So we'll see. Next, speaking of a game that probably will be a 66, it's Parasite Mutant. Parasite Mutant. So you probably haven't heard of Parasite Mutant. Denshattack and Eternal Life of Goldman were two more high-profile releases that both got showed off at like major events. But like Parasite Mutant most certainly has not. But it is very successful in terms of it's one of the more downloaded demos on Steam Next Fest because it is a spiritual successor to Parasite Eve. You probably are hearing me say that and say, "What the frick is Parasite Eve?" It is a Resident Evil esque game from the PlayStation 1. It was a cult classic, very loved, and it actually got a couple of games, I think, but it's basically a dead franchise now. It's very niche. I never played them, and yeah, it's Parasite Mutant. Parasite Mutant is essentially a fan game trying to capture the magic, trying to get out another good old Parasite Eve game. And I played a little bit of it, and it's not good. It's not very good. It's clearly like a fan made project. This is it, and it may just change. It may trick you a little bit when you're trying to download it because it's got like a real handmade like anime like cutscene like kind of screenshot deal trying to lure you in. But then when you actually play it, it it feels real janky. It feels really low budget. I'm trying to remember a game that makes me that remind Eternites Oh man, I think that's what I'm remembering. Yeah. I've spoken about it on the podcast before, but it's like an anime game where it's like a dating anime game with like combat and stuff. It's not good. It's like a solid 7 if you like. It's not even, I think it's a mild 7 really. It's not very good, but this feels very reminiscent of that. It feels very cheap. It feels like the only thing that would make this a successful game in any regard that would make anybody really want to pick it up is the fact that it is a Parasite Eve like spiritual successor, and you were just like dying. You're just like, please, for the love of God, give me anything that reminds me of Parasite Eve, and this is the closest thing you can get. Honestly, yeah, no, I'm never gonna touch this game with a 10-foot pole. Even if I played like Parasite Eve and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I must have something just like it. I would not go back to Parasite Mutant. So I would not recommend Parasite Mutant, especially if you don't care about Parasite Eve at all. Like, just go play Parasite Eve. Next was Vampire Crawlers. Vampire Crawlers. This is from the developers of oh my gosh, why is it escaping me? Vampire Survivor. Oh my gosh, thank you. The genre that everybody has the word survivor after their game because of Vampire Survivors. So from the developers of Vampire Survivors, we have Vampire Crawlers, and it is meant to be a fast-paced dungeon crawler game. It is nothing crazy though. I mean, like I personally am not super into these roguelike deck building games, and that's what this essentially is. It is a roguelike deck building game. It is trying to be a strategy slash quick go run 'em game. A lot of these dungeon crawling games you have to kind of play strategically. You have to use turn based, like building up, like buffs and debuffs and trying to make strategy amongst your moves. Vampire Crawlers is trying to be something that's like basically just mash the A button over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you just can get through battles. And you can certainly do that here. There is also some strategy, like if you play a move this turn, like your next move will be double the damage. But like most of the time, I didn't feel the need to do that, and I just mashed A, and it was still okay. I actually did not die in the demo. I got to the end of a run and death caught me and killed me. But either way, like you get to the end of the run and you go back to your main town and you can put, you know, you can upgrade X, Y, and Z, your damage, your health, this particular hero, whatever the case is, just like you would in Vampire Survivors. And so it's basically just another Vampire Survivors, and guess what I have 1,000,001 of? Vampire Survivors clones. I got 1,000,001 of those mother effers. They are out there in droves, and I just did not see the big difference here in this one versus anything else. And like, maybe if you I only played the game for like 30 minutes, like a run and a half. So like it was not that long. Maybe if you put 8 hours into this demo and you're able to tell me, "Oh no, dude, it goes places. It really takes a turn." Maybe I would believe you. But at the moment, I see it as another deck builder, another roguelike, survivor like, and I have 1,000,001 of those. I don't need another. This does not stand out to me enough to be that interesting, but I'm sure people will play it when it releases and be addicted to it. Next was Replaced. Replaced is a very beautiful pixel game set in a cyberpunk pixel art game set in a cyberpunk future, and it is pretty. It is very pretty. That is its defining characteristic. You're playing as an AI of a man who's died, and you're trying to bring him back to life by controlling his body, taking him around, and yeah, you're doing Batman Arkham combat, but it's all 2D. That's the catch. This game's defining characteristic is obviously how beautiful it is. It is absolutely stunning. And I think trailers made this game look really, really, really good. Combat, now that I've played it, is not that great. It is fine. It is just around. I do not think it is anywhere near as good as like a Batman Arkham or anything like that. Um, but it is around. And then gameplay beyond that is fine. It's just kind of by the numbers, and I think this demo has led a lot of people to be a little bit more down on Replaced than I would have initially thought. I think a lot of people were really looking forward to this game, and even I looked at some trailers for it, and I was like, oh, this looks like it could really pop off. And then I've been hearing people talk about it, and I played it myself, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, this seems fine. It doesn't seem like anything crazy though. And so it's really going to come down to the game in the long term, like how does everything, what exactly are you going to be doing in this game? How exciting is it? How good is the story? Does the combat really ever go anywhere other than just you have a punch button and you have a counter button? Because that's really all it is, at least in the demo. And it's just not very satisfying. It's not very in depth or interesting. So we'll see. Currently, I think Replaced was pretty anticipated. I was really anticipating it. It is Game Pass day one, so maybe I'll still check it out. But overall, not crazy high on my anticipated list right now. It definitely got knocked down a little bit, which is the risk of putting out a demo, right? So it's unfortunate, but it is gone down a little bit. Croak was the next one, another handmade game, 2D platformer. I'm the platforming king, so I have to try out Croak. Of course, it was one of the higher downloaded games on Steam Next Fest, so I was like, yeah, sure, it looks good. I'll check it out. Croak, you're playing as a prince that is also a frog, and you have a very limited subset of moves, but it is a puzzle platformer. And I did not realize it was a Twitch puzzle platformer when I downloaded it. I thought it was just a platformer, and it is a puzzle platformer, more or less. But you are using your moveset as the puzzle, and essentially you have your tongue, and it pulls you into a surface. And when it pulls you into a surface, you then are bounced off of it. So you bounce off of a surface, you go to another surface, and you can bounce off of them pretty much in perpetuity. It's a very defined arc to your bounce. It's a very defined arc to your tongue. So like it is very specific what you can do with your moveset. And that is also true with what is you're interacting with in like the world. So it's not like in mini platformers where you can just kind of jump around and like there's some wiggle room to what you can really do. It's like you have to press this button combo in this order in this specific place in order to get to the other end of this map. Like there is only one way for you to actually complete this platforming puzzle. And I am not as huge of a fan of those platformers as many others. The game's art style is nice. I won't say. I mean, out of all the games I've played that I've even talked about thus far, like easily Eternal Life of Goldman is 10 times prettier than this. It honestly makes it look sad comparatively. Croak is very fun to look at when it's looking good, but like a lot of its environments or stuff are built in terms of a game. They're not in terms of being pretty. So like it's nowhere near as pretty as something like an Eternal Life of Goldman. But like Croak is for those who are looking for a puzzle platformer or a Twitch puzzle platformer, as I would probably call it. It's a really good one, and it will really test your skills, and it'll really make you think, and it really utilizes its moveset in a really interesting and fun way. But I won't be picking it up because it'll frustrate the frick out of me. I mean, it got to a point where just getting to the end of the levels was like really difficult for me. And like that was very early on in the game. That was the demo. So, like I had to start really thinking about how my moveset worked and like how I needed to utilize it in order to get through some of the stages. So it's just it's a different way of thinking about it. Next was Rollin Rascal. Rollin Rascal is a game I've actually had my eye on for quite some time. It's basically a Sonic adventure. It's a modern Sonic Adventure clone, and oh my gosh, it was easily my favorite demo. It was easily my favorite demo. Now, I am very nostalgic for the modern Sonic kind of games. That was my favorite and slash first game I ever played as a kid was Sonic Adventure. So I am very, very, very nostalgic to that kind of gameplay, and Rollin Rascal is the closest I've seen anybody ever come to it. Rollin Rascal is what you would hope Sega would be making with a modern Sonic game, and they just refused to do that. So very fast paced, very colorful, very, very satisfying to move around at high speeds. The moveset itself is interesting, but also simplified, kind of like a Sonic. So like it's I mean like I highly not anticipate. I do highly anticipate it, but I highly encourage you if you are at all interested in like a modern Sonic kind of play style, you got to check out Rollin Rascal. Download the demo, see what you think. I loved it. I loved it. I will absolutely be buying it when it comes out. It is I think some people have tried in the indie scene to try and replicate a modern Sonic, and they've never gotten this close. This is the closest I've ever seen it done. So, highly looking forward to Rollin' Rascal. Next was Dead as Disco. Dead as Disco is one of the higher downloaded Steam Next Fest demos as well. And dang, it was fun as frick. Like, I didn't expect that. It was probably, beyond Rollin' Rascal, my favorite game that I played during Steam Next Fest. It is basically a Batman Arkham game meets Hi-Fi Rush, which I love, obviously, both of those games. It is a rhythm game where you're doing Batman Arkham combat to the beat. But like the thing about like that I really jived with it was like it always felt like I was doing something right, and it kind of steers the player in that way. Like, so Hi-Fi Rush, it's pretty unforgiving, and it's like if you miss a beat, you miss the beat, and now you effed up, and like you kind of have to like get back on the path a little bit. With Dead as Disco, it kind of auto rails you into a combo once you initiate it, and then it just kind of rewards you based on if you continue that combo correctly or not. So basically, you are always punching something to the beat, and it's always going along with that beat, so it always feels satisfying, but your score is just going to reflect on if you're actually doing it well or not. And while I know that sounds pretty bad, it sounds like the game kind of arrests you of a lot of combos and like makes it kind of an auto rail kind of system. There's definitely ways for it to get effed up outside of that. What I'm just saying is like it guides you. It steers you in the direction of trying to always be on beat, and it always made me feel as if I was doing a satisfying beat combo. It also has a lot of licensed music. Hi-Fi Rush really didn't have that much licensed music. It had some, but it didn't have that much. It seemed like Dead as Disco was really trying to lean into licensed music a lot more. I really love the style of Dead as Disco, and it's something that was not on my radar. I did not really know about it, and I'm really looking forward to Dead as Disco. It seems like it'll be a really fun time. There's going to be community made levels and leaderboards and all sorts of stuff. So like it really does seem like it'll be a complete package once it comes out. Next is Raccoin. Raccoin is one that I had an interest on because it is one of the many kind of gambling games that have been turned into like roguelikes for some reason. Because it's like, oh well, this formula is already addicting. Let's just make it also combo it with an already addictive gambling game. Okay. So Raccoin, if you've ever heard of a coin pusher, it's a coin pusher video game. So coin pushers, if you have never seen internet videos of them, are gambling machines. And so you essentially insert quarters into like a thing that's constantly pushing like a platform forward, and eventually whatever like falls off of the front of the platform, you get to keep. And so in a lot of cases, there's like a tower of quarters, like an intentionally stacked circular tower of quarters that will eventually fall forward, and you'll get this huge payout. So that's what you're gambling on. Essentially, you're dumping a bunch of quarters in to get that one big stack, that one big dopamine hit, right? So Raccoin is trying to play on that game, right? It's also something I had a personal interest in because somebody in my fantasy critic league picked this game, and they actually drafted the game. And I was just like, "Oh, interesting. Well, I have to really check it out now because now I want to see if it's going to do well." I am not saying this as somebody who has a vested interest in this game doing poorly because it's, on somebody else's list on my league. I genuinely did not enjoy my time with Raccoin. I genuinely did not. It's really unfortunate too because I saw this game and I remember he drafted it and somebody counterpicked it, not me, but somebody else counterpicked it, and he was like, "Oh, you messed up, man." He posted a trailer, and I was like, "Nah, dude, that actually looks pretty freaking fun." I was like, "Oh, that actually looks pretty sick." Like, wow, a gambling game where I don't have to actually invest my money. Perfect. Love it. And then like it's probably going to be like, situated, it's probably going to be programmed so that I ultimately win instead of the house winning. Sounds like a freaking good time to me. And nope. Raccoin, oh my gosh, it is boring as frick. It takes so long for things to freaking fall. It takes so long. So the way Raccoin works is you are waiting for things to essentially fall off the front of the platform. And once they do, they start this multiplier. And the multiplier is the more things that fall off, the more like bonuses that happen. And you're essentially just waiting for these bonuses to keep stacking because like that's the only way you're actually going to make any progress. And then like essentially once you get to a high enough count, the round ends. And you go to the store and you can buy a bunch of like upgrades or like special coins that can give you various abilities that can help you out. Right? So eventually I would go to the store, I'd come back, and you'd have like a certain number of coins. It's like 10 or 12 or something that you can just dump onto the machine whenever you want. To me, there was no point in like holding these, so I just dumped them all immediately. And then eventually I would just like run out. There would be nothing I could do. So I would just be sitting there waiting for the game to eventually have these things fall off. And then eventually they would, like slowly, very, very slowly they would. And thank God there's like a times 2 speed. So of course, once I figured that out, I was like, thank Jesus, turn the times 2 speed on. And then once I turned times 2 speed on, even then it took forever for anything to happen. And then it eventually got to a point where it was like, oh, you need to get 1,000,000 points to move on to the next one. I was like, there's no way. I've been slowly scraping my way to the top on this. Like I cannot get that many points. There's no way. And the game was like, well, you can't quit right now because you have X number of coins still left. And I was like, I know for a fact there's no way I am going to get to that many points anytime soon. And so like I basically was just sitting there watching the gameplay itself for like freaking 30 minutes. And I was like, and I know that's a lot of what you're doing in like a Vampire Survivors or something like that. But like even then, I always felt like I had some input in Vampire Survivors. Like I have to be avoiding enemies, or I have to be collecting these things and walking around picking up, like these experience points or something like that. In Raccoin, you're doing literally nothing. And I felt like very little that I was doing was actually benefiting me in terms of, moving the game forward or gaining points or something along those lines. And I know that like there's going to be fail states, there's going to be runs that aren't good, and so on and so forth. But it seemed like when a run was bad, if I'm assuming my run was bad, which by the way, my run was like 45 minutes or some nonsense. It was crazy. I was like, I'm not investing another 45 minutes into this. Run should not be 45 minutes in your roguelike. Like it should be 15 minutes tops. Or 15, maybe 20. Like if it's real crazy. But anyway, when I got to the end, I was like, no, I can't deal with this. This is too long. I'm not gonna deal with this anymore. And I immediately uninstalled it. I was happy to uninstall. I was so happy to be away from it. And like I was saying, that's right. I said I know that there has to be fail states, right? But I think that when you get a bad run in a roguelike, you need to be able to die. And and Raccoin, you can't. You just have to sit there and wait for the game to slowly decide that you're dead. And that is infuriating to me. That like I basically can start a round and immediately look at what's on my board, what I have available to me, and how many points I need to get, and I can say I'm never getting that. There's no way. Like there has to be a divine intervention for me to be able to get that. And I'm not even halfway through this run. And that's crazy to me. That's crazy to me. And you're probably like, well, Henry, you need to do a million runs and then you need to upgrade your stats and your overall stats and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, bro, I didn't even get far enough into it to do that because I thought my first run was so not fun that I was like, I don't want to continue to invest in this anymore. So Raccoin, a game that I think looked really good. And maybe still is. Maybe I just had a really bad first impression with it. But gosh darn, dude, Raccoin did not stick with me. Not at all. Next, Darwin's Paradox. This is the Konami Octopus 2D platformer, 2.5D platformer. They put out a Metal Gear demo at the same time that they announced the Metal Gear Solid 4 collection. They also announced the Darwin Paradox demo. This is a weird one because this is just so odd that Konami's publishing this at all. But gosh darn, does it look good. Its production values are through the roof, kind of like I was talking about, like the Eternal Life of Goldman, like how there's so much stuff going on in the foreground and the background. That's very similar with Darwin's Paradox. It's a 2.5D platformer where you're playing as an octopus, so you're climbing on walls and, like shooting ink and stuff like that. There's some underwater segments in the demo as well. The Metal Gear segment of the demo is only like half of the demo. It really doesn't last that long. But it is there, and it was fun while it lasted. But like, I don't know how prevalent that is I don't even know if that's in the main game. I assume it is. But anyways, I have been looking forward to this game because I am the platformer king. And I did not love my time with the Darwin Paradox demo. It was, I died a lot. It's really not as much about platforming as it is about, I don't even know what I would say it's about. It's in the demo there was obviously a lot of stealth. So it was a lot of going at the right time. It wasn't necessarily about platforming in the right way. It was about like, well, you need to stop now and go now. You're in the spotlight now, you need to go. Or you don't need to go. You're not in the spotlight, you need to go. Kind of deal. As we've all played in every stealth game ever, right? But I found it to be like I really just kind of wanted to keep moving, and like I found that I would die very frequently in the game. And that was kind of the same in the underwater segments. I just found that, the movement itself was not that interesting. It was clearly trying to play on like what you're doing in the level more so than what your movement is. And I don't know. I was not taken by it. It did not grab me. As a platformer or as a play style, it did not grab me. And that's bad. that's really bad. That really the only thing you have to really prop up your platformer with is like, well, it really looks pretty. Like, dang, does it look pretty. And again, like I am the platformer king, so I'm here to champion the platformers. Admittedly, I'm not as much of a 2D platformer as I am a 3D platformer guy, but like I should still be here saying like I see the draw. And I really just didn't have that much fun. I really was frustrated with the Darwin's Paradox demo at some times because I was dying so much. And again, that could be just my impatience. It could just be me not playing the game correctly. But like that was something that it just kind of it off put me a little bit. And I can't say I'm really looking forward to the game's full release now. I was willing to give it a chance before the demo, and I think now I'm not. Again, like this is one of the problems with the demo is like it can hurt you rather than help. So very unfortunate. Next is one you probably have never heard of. It's called Boost Vector. Boost Vector is like one that I didn't know anything about, and it was one of the it was up there on the charts, but it looked like a very fast like Sonic Adventure modern kind of game, and we already discussed I really enjoy that kind of game. So I picked it up, touched it in, and or booted it up, and it's made by like one dude, and I think it's even the demo pops up and it's like, yeah, it's I'm one guy, and I was like, okay, cool beans, man, good for you. And it is one guy, and you can kind of tell, but it is the menus are incredibly flashy. It's almost overwhelming how flashy the menus are. And you get into the game, and it's like a almost like a kart racer. It's like 3 laps around a track, but you're like running as an anime woman, and it's like, okay, like the speed here is kind of crazy. But it's so difficult to react to what's going on, and it kind of looks kind of cheap and budget. But like like in general, like you're like drifting and stuff, grinding on rails. I found it kind of hard to control. I see the appeal. I see what's going on here. I see the pitch. It's like, hey, what if we had Sonic Adventure, but it was a kart racer? And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Like modern Sonic stages, but what if it was a kart racer? Okay. Okay. I don't know, but maybe. So, I gave it a fair shake, and I bolted from it pretty much. Um Next, Super Meat Boy 3D. This is not from the creators of Super Meat Boy. Obviously, they just created or just put out Mugenics. So have not been working on Super Meat Boy 3D as well, but they did, I guess, help. I don't know. I don't even know if they helped, but they gave the IP to somebody to make Super Meat Boy 3D. So is it any good? Well, it's Super Meat Boy, certainly. It is you're playing as Meat Boy, and you are running around, and like the end of the level, if you die, you get to see all of your attempts play out at once, which I've always thought was a fun feature. And you also die a lot, and it's very Twitch, heavy platforming, skill and timing, and it's very hard. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say. It's very hard. So, how does that translate to 3D? I will say not well. You don't have control of the camera as in this 3D game, which is already like a big red flag. Is like, why is this game 3D if we don't have control of the camera? And then on top of that, you it just seems like it makes it a more difficult game to control because you don't have direct control over the camera. So being as it is a hard game that is meant to have you die many, many, many times, it seems like this was not the way to go about it. And I mean, maybe there. I mean, I wasn't there in the meetings. Maybe it was. I'm incorrect, but it seems like this is just. It could have just been another 2D Meat Boy game. Like they really could have just made another 2D Meat Boy game and called it a day. And in this case, the 3D aspect just makes it feel cheap, and it makes it feel like you don't have full control over something that you should have full control over. I don't know. It just did not click with me. I can't say I'm like the biggest fan of Super Meat Boy in general because I'm not as huge a fan on like super high difficulty games. But like this felt to me like it's really not going to make many people happy. So and I think I've seen that for the most part be a lot of what people are saying is like it's not really making a lot of people happy. It's kind of middling in response so far from what I'm seeing. Next was Crushed in Time from the developers of There Is No Game. Really enjoyed There Is No Game. It was kind of a puzzle game of sorts, puzzle narrative game, where you play as a game that there is no game. I would highly recommend checking it out. It's a cool game for sure. This is a spin-off title based on one of the like mini series of jokes that's in that game where you play as Sherlock Holmes. It's an adventure game, a puzzle adventure game. And in this one, you're playing as the characters in a game that's in an adventure game. So very meta, and that's kind of what There Is No Game is like. And so I was very intrigued by it. In this case, you are playing as that, but you only have the ability to like move, almost like flick or pull the screen in a way. So like if you wanted to pull like a chair across the screen, you wouldn't pull it. You would like pull it and release, and it would fling itself in the opposite direction, right? So kind of like flicking it in a way. Uh, it's an interesting way of interacting with it. I got stumped on one of the first puzzles and uninstalled it because obviously there's no freaking, walkthroughs on a game that hasn't come out yet. So like I was like, I can't figure this out. So I got stumped on it for like 10, 15 minutes and I was like, yep, I think I'm good. But I think hopefully that, maybe they add a hint system or something when the game comes out, in the future. It's supposed to come out this year, but it's definitely charming. I still have high hopes for it because I think the developer has interesting ideas, and I'm willing to give them a shot. So hard to really comment on it at the moment because I just didn't have to get to spend too much time with it because again I was very stumped. I'm very stupid. So it is what it is, as it is. Marathon. This is not a Steam Next Fest demo, but it was a beta that happened over the weekend. Still going on, I think, till February 6th. So the rest of the week, if you're interested in an open server slam. I played a match of Marathon. It's an extraction shooter. It seems to be that a lot of people are middling on Marathon. I think people. I was going into Marathon thinking it was going to be really good. That trailer that they just released prior kind of made me think that there was a lot going on in Marathon that I didn't prior think there was. Playing Marathon very briefly, it allowed me to realize, oh, yeah, it's an extraction shooter. It's an extraction shooter, but it seems like you're required to go in with a group of people, which is different than I assumed. I assumed it would be very similar to every other extraction shooter I've ever seen, which is you can choose to go in a group of people or you can choose to go in alone. It seems like Marathon requires you to go in with a group of people, which means that you're only going to be encountering groups of people if you find them out in the world, which I would think would lead to more fights rather than more, like interactions that could be either peaceful or violent. Kind of something that Arc Raiders has done very well. So I don't know if that's exclusive. Again, I didn't spend as much time with it as I'm sure a lot of people have. Again, I don't even think I'm the best person to talk about a game like this, because I'm not a first-person shooter guy and I'm not a multiplayer guy. So I don't know much about it. Or I don't feel like I'm an expert to really comment on it. But I can tell you what I'm hearing from a lot of people, and that is people seem to be fine with it. And that just does not seem good. I think you wanted to hear a resounding, like, oh, yeah, Marathon's coming. Like, watch out. Like, Marathon's coming around the bend, and that's not what we're getting here. I'm hearing a, like, yeah, Marathon's all right. Yeah, it's good. It's fine. It's fine. And like that's a death cry as far as I'm concerned. Why would you jump to marathon when you have an Arc Raiders already? Like, that doesn't make sense. And Arc Raiders is still really going strong. Lots of concurrent players every day. So why would you? Why would you? I don't know. That's a great question. I think Marathon hasn't answered it yet. So, really not a great sign for Marathon. Maybe I'll give it another shot, but I have been primarily talking about or playing Resident Evil Requiem or Resident Evil. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at the Resident Evil guy talk. I don't think they have that here because it's not officially like a 9. It is Resident Evil 9, but it's Requiem. So it's not really numbered. So anyway, Resident Evil Requiem is the newest mainline Resident Evil game. And it is an interesting one. It is currently at an 88 on Metacritic, which is very good. It is scored much higher than Resident Evil 8 and higher than Resident Evil 7, which are an 84 and an 86, respectively. And by that I mean Resident Evil 8 is an 84 and Resident Evil 7 is an 86. So, very good reviews, which is great. I kind of had high hopes for this game. Except for the thing that I am still kind of skeptical on, which is the splitting of the game in both an action and a horror element. So I'm about 2/3 of the way through the game at this point, and I am really enjoying it. It's been a great, fun time. It's so interesting to me to see the reception to it, though, in terms of critics, because it it has the exact problem that I would expect it to, right? The problem being is that the game splits the game almost down the middle in terms of horror and action. So there are some, like, you'll go back and forth between playing as Leon and Grace, who are your two main protagonists, Leon being the action side and Grace being the horror side. And so and I was very curious to see how they were going to do this, because what I assumed would be you'd probably play the game in chunks. So probably like maybe 2 or 3 times as Leon or 2 or 3 times as Grace, and you'd flop back and forth. So as soon as you would get one chunk of the story, you would then get the other chunk of the story from Leon. That just seemed like the obvious way to do it for me. Like, that just seemed like how you would probably want to pace the game. And that's not how they really do it. So really the first half of the game is Grace. And the second half of the game is Leon. At least I'm 2/3 of the way through it, and that's how I'm seeing it currently. The first half of the game is mainly Grace, but you have minor moments where you go in and you play as Leon. Like, very minor, like 10, 15 minutes. Then you go and you play as Grace for like 5 hours or something. Same thing with Grace, or same thing with Leon. You're playing as Leon for, 5 hours, and you'll play as Grace for like 10, 15 minutes. Something like that. Grace's segments are obviously super horror focused. Leon's are super action focused. And I assume I'll be going back to those segments. But like, I assumed critics would be looking at this and they would be saying, I'm frustrated because I really like the horror side of things, and I don't like the action side of things, and therefore half of this game sucks, or like vice versa. Like, if you're trying to please both audiences, which that is worth noting, is Resident Evil has really had this weird divergence. It's really had a crisis of identity in the past. So Resident Evil, ever since 4, has really kind of tried to struggle with the identity of like, well, Resident Evil 4 was the one everybody liked, and it was an action game. And everything else in the series has really been survival horror. So how do we make that balance? And so you have, half of the fan base that's like, well, I really want a scary game. And you have half of the fan base that's like, well, I really want an action game. And so when you pivot to something like 7, which did not sell very well. Critically, it did. It did okay, but it did not sell anywhere near as well as like something like a 5 or a 6 or a 6 is the best-selling game in the series. even though it's considered the worst. But anyway, it's what do you do? What do you do, right? When you have this divergence within your community, within your games that clearly is very different from each other. A very hardcore horror vibe and a very hardcore action vibe, both of which people like. It's just different subsets of your audience. Their answer to this was just put them both in there. Shove both of them in there at the same time. And what that said to me was like, well, then the people who didn't like this game are probably like who didn't like the action games are going to not like half of this game, and they're going to respond to that. And that's not what happened at all. People have really taken to this approach and they've really accepted it. Which I don't know. Why did they review Resident Evil 8 and 84? I don't know. That game is freaking rad to me. I love Resident Evil 8. And I thought a lot of people did too, but no, the game reviewed pretty lukewarm for the most part. Like it reviewed fine. It just it was considered good, not great. And so like it's just it's weird to see this reception. I think that the later I'm getting into it, the more I'm seeing nostalgic plays that I think a lot of critics will reward. A lot of critics are people just like you and me, and they do not think with things other than their brain a lot of the times. So if they see something that makes them happy, it doesn't matter if it's objectively good or not. It's a good score because they liked it. So like I see that for like Final Fantasy Remake and stuff like that. Is it truly that great of a game? I mean, there's definitely problems, but hey, nostalgia, right? So we're all going to be very happy about it. Resident Evil Requiem probably has the most nostalgia bait of any Resident Evil I've ever seen outside of the remakes themselves, because those are literal, like that's all they are. It's just a remake of a game. You do go back to like the police station in this game. That is not a spoiler. That's in one of the trailers. And there's a lot of like references to Resident Evil 2 and, like callbacks and stuff like that. So I think that it could have had an effect on reviews in a way. Regardless, what do I think? I think the game's amazing. I think the game's super fun. I think it's honestly kind of insane how much of a double down they made on the survival horror elements. To a point where the beginning of the game as Grace, I genuinely did not want to interact with combat at all. Like, I found combat to be something that the game actively was like, you do not want to engage with this at all, because there's so many enemies, and Grace is so weak as a playable character that it was genuinely impossible, and I mean this as a actual fact. It was impossible for me to fight everything. Not only was it impossible for me to fight everything, it was impossible for me to fight the vast majority of enemies I encountered. To a point where there was a section in a later part of the stage where I could not fight everything. Like I ran out of stuff to fight with. And it was of course intended to be that way, but like it very much like it was an emphasis. Like you cannot fight everything. Like if you try, it's impossible. We will continue to give you problems and you will continue to have issues with it. This game is genuinely scary. My hands were like sweating all the time because you are always on the back foot. Always. There was more than one occasion where I would just be like, nope, can't do this. I have to leave. Like I have to run away. I have to go back to another area and find resources, or like do anything I can to try and recover from this horrific situation that I'm in, because I am really effed up right now. And I mean, I can't remember the last time I've seen a horror game go that deep into it. Like Amnesia, it's very much that vibe of like, you can't fight these mother effers, but like you do have the resources to. So like you have the ability to. Like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, you cannot fight anything. So you have to hide. You have to run. In Resident Evil Requiem, you can fight things as Grace, But if you do, you're freaking going to take a real big wallop, or you're going to use a lot of your active resources that you have to really get through that fight. And it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a real problem. So like it's a real significant like step into survival horror. And if that's something you're looking for, holy frick, that half of the game is going to really do it for you. And then on the alternate side, you have Leon, which is the other half of the coin of Resident Evil in general, and he's having freaking chainsaw battles with people and stuff. Like early on in the game, it's just like, yeah, here's a chainsaw, Bick, just chop some enemies up. You know, like, it's crazy. And then like, of course, like the dichotomy is like, I'm not going to spoil anything, but like there are like very regularly with Leon, it's like, what the frick? This is like a totally different universe I'm in. Like it's almost wacky what's going on in this game right now. I can't believe what I'm seeing kind of stuff. It's goofy. So it's like such a weird transition from and you know Leon of course is going to drop his he goes full back Resident Evil 4 where you know like everybody remembers the classic like where's everybody going? Bingo, you know like classic Resident Evil line that's just so corny and kooky and it's like what the frick like I thought this was a serious zombie game and you know now it's like I'm just talking about like these quirky one-liners. Leon is full of those in this game. He's all it's all over the place. Should have worn a helmet. You know, like that. I was oh my gosh, like come on. You know, it's such a stark transition dichotomy to what you're getting with Grace that it's almost comical and it's somehow still works. I don't know why. I do not know how, but they make it work. I'm still playing through the game. I didn't want to give full impressions because I haven't gotten through the end of the game, but I played 66% of it according to what the game is telling me. It's about a 10 to 12 hour game. Open world is I think a very large stretch. Open area is you know there's a lot of optional things you can do or ways that you can take on different things in different orders if you wanted to. And I enjoyed that. It felt like the environments were not too big but very dense, and I love games like that. Where I feel like there's so many nooks and crannies to like such a small space that I can master, rather than like a large open area that has a bunch of stuff that I don't care about. So like I really like that approach in any game really. So right now, fully enjoying my time with Resident Evil Requiem. We'll continue to be playing it, and hope to give my full impressions next episode, which I'm sure will be. It's still very good. Like I can't see this game doing anything else than just being like, yeah, it's a solid fun time. Like what are they gonna do? Like tell a bad story? Like Resident Evil's story has ever been good? You know, like come on, nothing's gonna really ruin this at this point. So good game, great game. Highly recommend it. So that will wrap up all of my impressions for this week. There's a lot. Been jumping around a lot. So dang, big episode, even though, you know, news was light but heavy at the same time, right? You know what I'm saying? And games were mini but light, if you know what I'm saying. So it was a different episode this week for sure. But I appreciate you sticking around. 2.5 hours. That's a long time to commit to a boy like me. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you being here as always. As always. I hope I can call you a friend. I hope you're playing some good video games. I hope I get over this freaking flu sooner rather than later. I hope you haven't been disgusted by my gross, phlegmy voice. I think I'm doing much better, but love you, and I hope you play some good video games, and bye-bye!